Hello and welcome to another fabulous video by Corporate College. My name is Ashley Speaker, and today we're going to talk about ISO standards in industry. And I'm joined today by Samantha Kaplan, our Director of Quality and Continuous Improvement at Corporate College. Thank you so much for joining us, Samantha.
Well, thank you, Ashley. It's great to be here.
Yeah, I'm really excited. I was actually having flashbacks as we were preparing for this to about 2 years ago, sitting in your office and having you explain ISO standards to me because it was not in my wheelhouse at all.
Yes, I remember that.
Yeah, which I mean, it becomes really helpful once you do have it explained. And I feel like it's something that some people have heard about if they're in industry, but if they're new to industry, they might be new to them. There's others that maybe have only dug into certain sides of standards for their organization. But first, before we jump in, I really want to dig into your background. If you could just give us a little bit about your journey in quality and continuous improvement so we get an understanding of where you come from.
Well, it goes back, quality found me. I didn't go looking for it, but I started out my career in environmental health and safety. So with compliance, environmental assessments, and those type of things. And I was asked a question well, you have an environmental background, would you be interested in this thing called ISO 14001? They were putting a training program in place at the college, and they said, would you help us? And I said, sure. Didn't know what I was getting into, but got involved with ISO 14001, which is an environmental management system. Then went back into industry after that, got involved with ISO 9001 quality, got involved in auditing quite a bit. At that time, even more into quality with getting a Lean Six Sigma black belt and other ISO and lead auditor certifications, and I just never got away from it. And I really got interested into the other standards. I ended up going to GE Healthcare and getting it in with a medical device manufacturer. So even more standards. And I was in charge of the site audit team. So I just sort of just kept going within this quality and continuous improvement realm. And I guess I caught the bug, and I never left. So that's sort of how I got into that. It's a short version of a few years, but and now I have the opportunity. I'm between implementation and training, but also first, second, and third party audits. So doing a lot of auditing within many different types of industries, which is it's exciting thing to do.
Yeah, that's great. And it sounds like such a variety too. So I think sometimes when people think of quality, they can think of, boring, but you have so much of a variety that you're facing with different industries, as well as, you touched a little bit on Lean Six Sigma, as well as the standards themselves, which we're going to jump into here in a little bit. When we talk about ISO standards, ISO, standards in general, what are they and why do organizations use them?
Okay. People don't realize there are hundreds of ISO standards that are out there. And I guess a quick, simple way to say ISO in general terms, for those that remember what film used to be packaged from Fuji, Kodak, not digital cameras, but when they actually had film, they were packaged. They all had an ISO number on the box. So there was a set standard for how they made film. And there's a lot of those for different products that are made. So there's a consistency. There's a lot of standards. So there's a consistency within the organizations. So that is kind of the easy way to say what ISO is. And there's a lot of standards out there, but the key ones we're really talking about are the ones that organizations implement within their business. Those are the key ones that I work with. But if you would go to ISO.org, you would just see hundreds of ISO standards for products and services and systems.
Right. And we're not going to go over the hundreds, right? We're just going to
No,
go over
no.
some of them.
No, we'd be here a long time.
Yeah, right. Well, and is it just organizations that seek them out, or are the customers of those organizations of, a company looking for certain standards to be met?
Yeah, a lot of it is they're voluntary. However, In industry, you're going to see that the customers are saying, well, you're going to be doing business with us. These are our suppliers. These are the requirements we have for you. And a lot of the time, the one of the initial requirements is either ISO 9001, which is a base standard for business, or it could be if you're in automotive, aerospace, medical device, there are specific standards for specific types of manufacturers and certain types of industries. But usually it's a lot of the most of the time I'd have to say customers are saying you need to have this. But we have worked with organizations that have voluntarily on their own, seeing how it can put a systematic approach to how they do their processes. They've gone ahead and done that on their own and put this structure in place at their organization.
And I mean, that would really work to their advantage, right? To
Hmm.
not only have a system, but also be ahead of the game when their new customers come and they say, look what we already have, right?
Yeah, and some have actually said, well, we're looking at this. We're going to talk to our customers. We want to get into the automotive business or another line of business. Let's see if it's worthwhile for our organization. Let's do this. We know there's more requirements, but it's additional business and additional customers for them.
That's great.
Mm,
So let's talk about some of the different ISO standards. You actually already started naming some, which is a
I
great
know.
lead-in, little
Mm,
teaser there. A good starting place, we talk about, and especially like when students call me or they call you, is that general quality standard known as ISO 9001. Could you explain what that standard is for? Why is it the general quality standard and other aspects of it?
yes. ISO 9001 is what you would say the standard base of all the other standards too. It's almost, I'm going to say it was generic, but it's based so manufacturing could adopt it, insurance, banking, education, all of those different type of services. Public sector, if they wanted to, they can implement the standard as well. And really, I call it a business management system. It's really looking at your processes and putting a systematic approach of how you're doing business. And it's a really structured way to ensure that you have good, consistent product or service going to your client. And then if you do have any issues, you have a process in place to correct it and continually improve as you go. I won't get into everything, but there's a set structure to it, and there's certain requirements that say shall, and there's certain documents you need to have as an organization to ensure you are meeting the standard. And as part of that, to doubly ensure that, you are checking yourself by auditing yourself because you're required to. And then also, if you wanted to go for the certification, there's a third party, it's called a third party, an outside registrar comes in and checks to see how effective you are and how efficient and effective, and if you're actually meeting the standard requirements. So you're getting checked to ensure that you're doing things correctly and your business is functioning and you're moving forward.
Well, that's great too. And I feel like it just adds that value to the certification to have someone coming in from the outside, as well as doing your
Mhm.
internal ones, because you want to be prepared when those individuals come in. You also want to be checking that you're living up to your own standard. But to have someone from the outside come in and do those audits would really give you that
Mhm.
validation.
Well, definitely, definitely. And there's a lot of structure to it. So think about it. You're looking, so if it's a manufacturer in your product, you're looking at it from how are we handling our suppliers? How are we handling our purchasing, the designing of our project or product, how we're handling the operations and manufacturing of it, and how do we handle it when it goes out to the customer, the, the end consumer, and what if there's defects or issues and it comes back, how do we fix it? So it's kind of comes full circle, and it's exactly how you operate your business. It's no different, and it puts that structure in place.
That's really helpful. And that's so much packed into one set of standards already, right? We've only talked
Yes,
about 9001.
yes.
So, another one that we offer throughout the year, and I know we also offer it to the organizations that come to us for training specifically for them, is that automotive standard IATF, the 16949. How is that different from just getting like an ISO 9001 certification that we just spoke about?
Yeah, I tell folks that are in some of my sessions, it's ISO on steroids. there's a lot of additional requirements. So think about it, a product that's going into, you're putting a product or a service that's going into a vehicle, the safety concerns, and just the additional requirements that the automotive industry, Ford, Chrysler, GM, there's specific customer requirements that you have to adhere to, but even just taking ISO and adding on all these additional requirements. I don't want to throw out all the acronyms, but there's a lot of different tools that you have to know. There's additional requirements on auditing. There's additional requirements on how you're handling customer requirements. There's just a lot of additional requirements for the organization. So if you want to be in the automotive industry, you have to be aware IATF, there is a lot more to do. But it's part of making sure there's quality, because look at driving a car and all the parts in the car to ensure we're safe on the road. Those parts and services, everything has to be aligned correctly.
Wow. And then when you think about that, like in the automotive industry, it's not just like our big manufacturers that we think of, right? It's the other suppliers that supply to them that are also looking at
hmm
those standards.
Yeah, the different tiers. So you have to think about it. All the parts that go into possibly a transmission, all the things that going into a steering wheel. What about the parts that go into airbags? All those suppliers, it's not one supplier, but maybe multiple suppliers that go into those safety items. So there's a lot that goes into that. And there's different tiers of suppliers that make up everything that gets into that Mustang or whatever, Camry, whatever car you drive. There's a lot of, there's quite a few businesses that are probably ISO 9000 or IATF that people don't even realize that goes into everything there.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, transitioning from the ground to the skies,
hmm
can you tell me about the aerospace standard? Who's using this standard? What is it for?
Yeah, so there's a one specific to the aerospace and defense. You will see that they have that. That's AS 9100. That's very specific to that. So to those manufacturers that are in that food chain of uh, planes, anything going into planes, military. So that could be um, part of the wing, it could be the ventilation system, it could be anything within that plane. And we know what, the traceability, just like with the car and just like with the planes, the key thing is with traceability. So if something happens, we know in the news recently there have been some where they've some planes aren't flying right now because they're figuring out what is going on, and that's all traceable to those manufacturers to see what that's about. So again, very diligent. There's a very strict set of standards specific to aerospace. And if you want to be in that industry, AS 9100, that's strictly for aerospace manufacturing.
Wow. Yeah. So, all these industry specific ones, which is really, really helpful. And, we have another industry that's so important right now, which is the medical field. And related to that, we offer the ISO 13485 standard. Could you talk about how that plays a part specifically in the medical device industry?
hmm Yeah, so now we're talking with medical devices. So that could be anything from, for example, if you've gotten an MRI, a CT scan, it could be a sterilized product, something injectable where, people get knee replacements. Think about that. Those are medical devices or parts. There is a standard 13485 for that. And I have a little bit of experience since I worked at GE Healthcare. I was there for quite a few years and got to know that very well. Because in addition to that, a lot of organizations linked with medical devices, we want to make sure patient safety, right? That's key and utmost, ensuring patient safety. And how do we do that? There are set standards for that. But another level that's added to that, if you're in that business, is FDA with CFR 820. So there's another standard and regulation there that's from the FDA that links into 13485 as well. So just the strict structure of, you're making a medical device, it could be somebody being tested to diagnose something. you want to ensure you're ensuring patient safety and that medical device is doing what it's supposed to do. And then again, for example, if there would be a recall, like if somebody had knee surgery and something for some reason, they need to track where all those implanted, there's a whole traceability piece for that. So everything links together. It's in a quality system and you have to adhere to it again. I'm going to say it again. If you want to be in that business, you have to adhere to the standard. And there's set very specific structure, and it's related to verbiage, of course, related to the medical device world.
Yeah.
So that's a very distinct, just like automotive, aerospace, and medical device. A lot of the time, you'll see people in quality have very distinct um, experience, and sometimes they choose a path within certain industries. Some people will continue within medical device, but then I've also seen others that have also gone from automotive to healthcare or have gone into aerospace because they have the quality background. Any way you look at it, it's a business management system, and that's sort of my philosophy. It's not quality, and we think about it sometimes. It's how you operate your business. You're going to have good quality, safe product, and the customer's getting what they want.
That's great and so
Mhm.
helpful once you have those in place for all
Mhm.
employees to just have that standard that they're following. It's a system, so it's a constantly, flowing machine, right?
Very structured, yes.
Mm.
And there's documentation related to it. So you have that structure, you have that consistency. That's really key, that consistency. So if they're getting 2,000 parts, they're all going to be right because you're doing it, but you have a consistent process.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's great.
Mhm.
So moving away from like industry specific standards, which there's plenty more to talk
Mhm.
about, as you mentioned,
Yes.
um, there's other really helpful standards that a lot of organizations adopt in addition to some of the other standards. One of them is that ISO 14001, which you mentioned was the first one you got into. Could you give a snapshot of it as an environmental standard? And then also, if you could dive in a little bit to why are environmental management systems so important, especially in industry today?
Mhm. Yeah, I'm actually going to start with that second part
Okay.
first, if that's okay.
Yeah, that's great.
Really, as we look at organizations, where we're at, the idea of sustainability, being a good citizen of the earth, and really looking at organizations to say, how are we going to improve this going forward? A lot of the organizations, not all are required to. However, I'm going to jump in. Those that are IATF in the automotive, a lot of the time they are 14,001. There are those organizations that say we want to have an environmental management system. We don't have to. So we see both. But really, it's for them looking at how can we improve what we're doing? How are we going to prevent pollution, minimize risk, look at not having spills because maybe we have oils and hazardous waste. It's part of industry. We can't get away from it. Some of the processes. How can we improve what we're doing? How can we recycle? How can we look at minimizing waste streams? There's one organization I was talking to. They injection molding. They had leftover pellets. They are finding a way to utilize it in other products. So it goes into other products, and they'll eventually potentially purchase it from other suppliers to make a new product. Um,
Wow.
Others maybe have a wastewater, a waste stream. They're recycling it within their own organization, so they're not having to dispose of it. So it's really for an organization to look at what environmental aspects and impacts do we have with what's going on within our business? How can we be sustainable and pick things where we can eliminate, reduce, whatever we can do to better the environment? It may be, for example, I'll give you another example, Ashley. We have the Great Lake here. We have Lake Erie. Water is not a resource that we are needing. But if you go to the West Coast, we know that there's been droughts
Hmm.
and things like that. But still, we want to be able to reduce our water usage. So you never know if the one day where we could be in a drought situation. But however, there are organizations here locally that are reducing their water usage where they can, because it's also minimizing that, but also a cost reduction for the organization. And overall, they have those resources that can impact something else within their company. Hope I answered your questions there, Ashley.
No, I think you did. And I think you really brought it home with the examples of how so many places would look at it and use it. Because it's different ways of thinking about the environment in terms of like your industry might be slightly different from the next person's. But at the end of the day, you want to be a good citizen. You don't want to leave that huge environmental footprint. It's really important that we are conscious of those decisions and putting in the management systems in place that can help that.
Most definitely. And often they are integrated with their quality system most often. So you see quite a few organizations that have multiple standards that they adhere to.
Yeah, and that's a good thing, to be able to do multiple ones at once. Another one that an organization might be wanting to is the occupational health and safety standard, that 18,001. Could you talk a little bit more about that?
Sure, and that's been revised. It's ISO 45001.
Oh, okay.
It's been revised, yes. So, and that is, with occupational safety and health, there are a lot of organizations that have that as well. We're really looking at, a lot of them have 14,000 and 45,001, where they're looking at not just the environment, but safety hazards and occupational health at their organization. How can we improve on safety? And let me take a step back with talking about 14,000 and 45,001. It's it's inherent and it's believed that you should already be in compliance. You're going above and beyond where we're compliant, but how can we do things to improve as an organization so perhaps we don't even have to have those issues to be compliant to in the first place, where maybe you're reducing or eliminating something within your processes, so now maybe you don't have to worry about that regulation or that standard now. So you're going above and beyond and making improvements so you have a safe environment for your workers and just your whole facility. So you'll see a little bit of both. And those two overlap somewhat in some cases, but again, those are best practices for an organization to have in place.
Yeah, I think that's
Mhm,
great to know too that like I mean there's already laws and regulations in place for
mhm.
these places regarding both of those. Going above and beyond is what you can do for, protecting the consumer, for protecting your own workers, for protecting the environment. I mean, that's a really great thing for a company to make that decision and say we're going to go to that next step.
Definitely.
Awesome. Well, finally, we just mentioned so many standards and there are so many more.
It's an
How would
alphabet soup. That's all I can say.
Yeah, I imagine. How would an organization choose the right standard or standards to get certified in, if they're looking to get started or they're looking for their next step? Do you have any tips for evaluating what their needs are?
Mhm. Yeah, a lot of the time we really tell them one, w- a lot of the time, is your customer asking you, what is the purpose for it? Are you doing this as an organization? A customer isn't asking you. They just know that it is a place where they want to be with their organization. It's a growing organization. They want to put it in place. Or we say, find out from your customer, what are they looking for? What line of business? Is it just ISO 9000? Are you looking to get into automotive? Is your customer asking you? That's a lot of the time. And then also when we work with organizations, to really see where they're at, if they know they're on the path and they're talking to their customer, we would do a gap assessment to say, well, where are you currently? Here's where you need to be. Let's take a look and assess your organization to see how far you have to go in order to get there. So we can help support, with help with the implementation, or maybe it's just helping with some internal audits along the way, or some training. It all varies and it's all different with each organization. But we're here to support their journey towards certification or just maintaining their certification.
Yay. Well, thank you so much, Samantha. Again, I'm having flashbacks to sitting in your office, younger me. But this was so helpful. And I think sometimes it can be overwhelming to approach something, especially as dry as seeing like abbreviations and numbers. So being able to get a little glimpse into each one, I know will help individuals watching this video. So thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me today.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it, Ashley. Had fun.
Oh, good. I'm glad. Well, you can come back anytime. I think I have a few ideas for some of our next ones, even going off of this, what we chatted about today. There's so many directions we can go. But yeah, so if you're interested at all, if you've been watching the video and want to find out more about corporate college, what trainings we do for our ISO standards, or to find out more about what other things we can offer you in regards to ISO, please reach out to us. Our website will be in the description above. And as always, have a safe and wonderful day.